Parker. It's News Talk 820 93.3 FM WBAP. And Donald Trump's in Davos right now on stage at the World Economic Forum. I was watching it right before my shift started here. And that was one of the topics that's being covered heavily. And who's stopping us? If we really want Greenland, like, seriously, who could stop us? Because Denmark technically owns it right now. Could Denmark stop us? Would there be a coalition of NATO members who would rush to Denmark's defense against us? And so this is an interesting pivot in history we're about to see, because it's one thing that I was listening to earlier. I'm like, ooh, I'm going to pull this and I'm going to play it for you. Check out this one little sentence here from Donald Trump. Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. I was still watching it live here. Let me go back to what I recorded. This was about 30 minutes ago.
But the problem with NATO is that we'll be there for them 100%. But I'm not sure that they'd be there for us if we gave them the call.
Which is kind of a good point. Would they be there for us? So what is the point? Has NATO outlived his usefulness? That's interesting stuff. Now, he's taking questions on the break. I'll go back and listen to that and share if he has any more goodies that I think you would be interested in. But I think the story you should be most concerned about today is these ICE protests are getting way out of hand. There are now roving bands of, air quote, ICE protesters. And if they see someone in a car that they think is an ICE agent or a Trump supporter, they're swarming the car and they're trying to pull them out and beat them up. Now, you would think, James, that's really a hyperbolic story. That's not happening. Go look at social media. The media's not talking about it. Fox News will put up a little bit here and there about it, but they're all on this Trump stuff and World Economic Forum and Greenland and all the wars and stuff. But this is happening. And luckily, I found a clip where they only cussed a couple times, so there's not a whole lot of beeps.
That's him! That's him!
All right, so they're saying that's him. There's a group of people. Some of them have their cell phones out recording. Some people are the actual attackers here. That's him. There's a guy that stopped at a traffic light in what looks to be downtown something or other. I don't know if it's Portland or Minneapolis. I know it's not Bug Tussle. And then one of the windows is open in the car, and so they try and pull this dude out, and then they're trying to break the back window. It looks like they're punching the back window, trying to get this guy out of the back seat, too.
Is that him? Yes! Open the door! Oh my God! Drive! Oh my God! Just drive! Stop! Wait! Let them go! Let them go! Hey, pull over! Hey, leave it! Get out of here! Leave it up! Get out of here! No! Y'all just let him leave! It's not working! Hey! We don't know him! Stop it! Let him out! Let him out!
So the car is surrounded, and they have to start going about 2 miles an hour until people get out of the way of the front of the car, and then they just gun it with the horn blast. That was them blasting the horn and getting the heck out of Dodge. They didn't make it very far because they're in the downtown of something, and traffic slowed them down, but they got away from that mob. So what you didn't see, but you heard, is there are mobs of liberal protesters attacking conservatives in public, in their car, on the sidewalk, at their place of business. This is way out of control. This is a pretty feral gang. They're not over there to give you a back massage or to have a spirited debate. These are people that think they're fighting Nazis. And there it is. Example number 648 of what? White rural rage? No, not white rural rage. That's what you were warned about. Now, this is a clip that's almost 2 years old now. In 2024, boy, if Donald Trump wins, white rural rage is just going to explode. These guys wrote a book about it, how it's just teetering on the edge. White people, especially men in rural areas, they're dangerous. They're prone to violence. They persecute. They're political. Come on, man. It's exactly the opposite in the real world. Check this out.
Joining us now, Professor of Political Science at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, Tom Schaller, and journalist and opinion writer Paul Waldman. Their new book, out tomorrow, is entitled White Rural Rage, the Threat to American Democracy. And Tom, we'll start with you. Why are white rural voters a threat to democracy at this point? You would think, as we pointed out, looking at Joe Biden's background and Donald Trump's, that The opposite would be true.
I mean, we lay out the fourfold interconnected threat that white rural voters pose.
All right, we don't have to play the whole thing. So they were telling you a couple years ago, Trump wins. Look out for white rural rage. Now, look with your own eyes what you see, not just what the media shows you, but what you see through social media, what's being shared to you by your friends and other people and talk radio accounts that you follow and Dallas Express. And look at the videos online. Do you see liberals getting pulled over in their car in red state America? Do you see roving mobs of violent people attacking their political opposition in small town America? In any place that's run by Republicans or anybody that's on Team Red in some form or fashion? Are you seeing this happen in the red parts of the metropolitan areas where you are experiencing this? Where are the roving bands? Is it in the exurbs? Is it way out in McKinney? Is that where you have to be worried? Do you have to be worried when you're out in Forney of roving mobs? How bad does it have to be? How bad do you have to be persecuted? Whether it's for your race, for your religion, for your now political affiliation, before you stand up. And you should kind of get upset that nobody's standing up for you. Well, except for me. But all the people who are concerned about, well, just got to feel safe. They're terrorizing people. I think you understand the bitter irony here. It's they're griping about ICE. Why are they griping about ICE? Because ICE, they're masking up and they're attacking. They're just pulling people out of their cars with no warrants, with no due process, beating the crap out of them, destroying their lives, separating them from their families. And what are they doing in response? They're masking up. They're going and pulling people out of their cars and their house and their place of business and now their place of worship and ruining their lives. They have become the thing that they are accusing you of. Here's the dirty secret. They were always that thing. And I have more audio from the ICE protests that are getting out of hand. Gun up, folks. It can only stay out of Texas for so long. We have a walkout, actually, that happened in Texas. I'll tell you about that next on The James Show. News Talk 820, 93.3 FM, WBAP. Hey, so the ICE protests are getting out of control. I'm James Parker, News Talk 820, 93.3 FM WBAP. You're home for Markley, Van Camp, and Robbins, and they've been talking about this as well, especially the part where they broke into the church this weekend in Minneapolis and, disrupting church services. That's interesting because you didn't want ICE going into churches because you thought churches were sacrosanct. You thought churches were these special places where we could just put politics aside. Targeting church services is wrong. Well, that's what Tim Walz said when it was ICE saying that they were willing to go into churches.
I would fully expect, and we are preparing for, an influx of more agents, more of the very visible public theatrics of the raids, of the harassments. And you got faith leaders here. I would not put it past this administration to target midnight mass services amongst folks going to worship, because that's who they are.
Yeah, that's who they are. And you know who does that? Bad people. You know who targets church services? They're like the worst people ever. Unless it's our side. Yeah, we see what you did there. We see what happened. So the ICE protests, now they have roving bands of people that are harassing perceived ICE officers in public. There was a guy who got harassed. In fact, they were part of an ICE Watch group. And they were like, oh, look, I think ICE has been spotted in our area. And I don't know if it was like a false accusation or a false alarm. But then some other people who were part of their group showed up at the cafe and they're like, are you the guys that are the plainclothes ICE officers? And they're like, no, we're looking for them too. And they're like, you're lying. We know you are. How do you prove you're not an ICE officer? And so they were getting griped at by their own. Oh, it was beautiful. But they're going to keep escalating it until more people get hurt, more people get killed. I don't see any other way.
It is funny, right? When you find out what an ICE agent does on the weekend and you go and harass them, there's not much they could do about it. Because at that moment in time, they're just a private citizen. And you're a private citizen. So the federal government can't do anything about it.
Let's just go harass law enforcement officers who are doing their job. Remember Tom Homan was doing the exact same job, overseeing deportations for ICE. When Barack Obama was president, he got a medal for it. He did 3 million, by some counts, 5 million deportations. Were you guys harassing ICE officers on the weekends then? And by the way, hey, fella, you just gave us the reason why ICE has to wear masks. Because you people are getting their identities and you're not leaving them alone. You're even bragging about harassing these people on the weekends. You're a terrible person if this is what you do with your free time. And there's no caveats to it. I don't care if you think you're doing this with good intentions. I know someone has convinced you this is Nazis and just following orders isn't an acceptable excuse. But you're the bad guy in this situation. So now we have roving bands of people like you just heard, harassing not only ICE agents, but people who are perceived to hold the beliefs that you hold. And you're just lucky that you live down here amongst sane people. But when they get enough people stirred up, don't think this can't happen in Texas. Don't think this can't happen at some point with the roving mob of upset people in downtown Dallas or downtown Austin or somewhere in Houston. This gets big enough. These people do this like it's a trend. Like, remember how for 2 years there when I was in 7th and 8th grade, maybe 9th grade, we used to tight roll our jeans? If you were in school then, like in the early 90s, late 80s, we used to fold the front of our jeans to the side and tight roll it up. And everybody did that. Why? Because everybody did that. And for a few years, it's just what you did. That's how these people treat persecuting people like you. But you were told, again, let's go into I love doing this. Go into the Audiotron 3000's archives. We're going to go back all the way to the Land Before Time 2024. Again, Rachel Maddow. She's concerned about roving bands of right-wing death squads. Really?
And this is a president who has activated pro-Trump paramilitary groups that, wear insignia and T-shirts and hold placards celebrating literally right-wing death squads, right? This is a president who has talked about absolutely using the Justice Department to go after his rivals.
They tell you that you need to look out There's going to be rural white people that are going to be raging out and they're going to be committing acts of violence and they're going to be persecuting their political opposition. You fast forward to 2 years later and the exact opposite is happening. Roving bands of upset lefties are now harassing their political opposition, including law enforcement officers. That's not what you were promised, though. How wrong can they get it? It's the same thing with global warming. We're supposed to not have a polar ice cap by now. They've been saying that for 20 years. Still have a polar ice cap. You guys never change your worldview? You didn't think, well, I read this book, right, White Rural Rage, and they were promising that there was going to be a bunch of upset people in small town America that were lashing out at liberals and their political opposition and minorities and gays and women, and it's not happening. But the opposite's happening. When do you ever change your worldview? When do you ever update that worldview? They told you inflation was transitory. Then it went to 9%. They told you Obamacare would let you keep your doctor and keep your network, and it would lower costs by like $2,000 a year. Didn't do any of that. You were told wearing a mask would work. You were told the vaccine would work. You were told the lockdowns would work. How many times did they have to get it wrong? There are 10 NFL coaches that got fired on the same day, some of which had a winning record. The Bills coach just got fired for losing in the second round of the playoffs. We hold our football coaches to higher account than our politicians, our media members, and most dire academia. Because coming up next, you're going to hear about a walkout that happened just yesterday, University of Arkansas Law School. Why? Because they believe men can have babies. I know that sounds silly, but you'll hear it next on News Talk 820, 93.3 FM, WBAP. Should students even be allowed to walk out of class? I'm James Parker on News Talk 820 93.3 FM WBAP. Like, I don't think they should be thrown in jail. And I'm not talking about college students. I'm talking about minor children who are in public schools. And here in Texas, there was a walkout that happened in Bryan, College Station, Bryan and Aggie Land. A bunch of students walked out. And this was floating across your social media. Having a good time, holding signs, ditching school. All right, and I it doesn't upset me that they have opinions that differ from mine. So this isn't me like just being a jerk and rejecting anyone who thinks different from me. But a couple of takes here. Number one, they're minor children that are in school. Shouldn't they be in school? Should they be allowed to just break the rules for political reasons, or really for? Doesn't it have to be a better reason than this? Like if you got stabbed and you want to run to the hospital next door, sure, you can leave class. Everyone understands that's an emergency situation that requires action. But to protest ICE here in Texas, really? They're just enforcing the law. And so some of these questions that you can almost say them for me. You know it's coming. Number one, did you have any student walkouts when Barack Obama was deporting 3 million people? No, you didn't. So this isn't actually about students caring about deportations. This is adults brainwashing children to only care when they're told to care and not caring when their guy's in charge. So it's not even a genuine protest. Now, on top of that, this is where it's going to sound mean, but it's true. And you need to digest this without saying, that sounds mean. You're a mean guy. No, this is true. Should anyone care what a 14-year-old thinks about statecraft and the way we arrange society? How much stock should we put into the opinions of the least educated, least experienced, not even judgmentally mature citizens? I mean, can you think whose opinion should we value less than a 14-year-old who's never even had a job, who's never paid a tax, who can't even drive a car? But you're going to tell the rest of us how we should arrange our affairs and govern ourselves? Even if I agreed with you, I would say, listen, this isn't the way to go about it. But what are you really teaching these kids? You're teaching them that if they don't like the way their society is governed, have a hissy fit. This is how you change things. This is how it works. But that's wrong. That's not how we set up the system. That's not what a republic is. But what you're supposed to do in a liberal democracy, y'all, all the threat to democracy folks, if you don't like the way things are governed, you're supposed to, go to the primary here on, March 3rd? Yeah, we're just about like 6 weeks, not even 6 weeks away from when you can actually do something about it and not go stand in the street and not hold a sign. One of the signs said F ICE. That's nice. We've got children out there holding F ICE signs. This is what the adults are training them to do? Because the adults told them to do this. The adults set it up. The adults allowed it. The adults aren't going to punish them when they should be punished. The adults are the ones that were filming it and putting it out there. The adults were the ones that told the media. The adults in the media decided that they were going to show up and treat this like it's a great thing, not like a bunch of truants ditching class because they're being politically exploited by really sinister adults who probably think they're doing the right thing. But if by doing the right thing, you are convincing a bunch of kids to ditch class and hold signs in order to further your political cause, boy, that's a weird exploitation of children that you've gotten comfortable with. 800-288-9227, 800-288-9227. Let me ask you this. What if that was one of your kids? What if you found out one of your kids walked out in class to protest ICE? Would you have a chat with them? Would you sit them down and explain to them why they're on the wrong side? This lady I used to work with in TV, she got a job in California. So she moved out there. And her seventh grade daughter, when her daughter was in seventh grade, came home with a pride flag and put it up on her bedroom wall. And her mom got home. It's like, I didn't even know. Where did you even get a pride flag? You're a child. You can't go to the store without me. You're not purchasing things behind me. It's not like you ordered it on Amazon. She said her teacher gave it to her. Why? Because it was Pride Week or something like that. Pride Week. I thought that was in June and we're not even in school. Yeah, well, they had another one, so you didn't miss it. And so she had to like to take this flag and explain. She had to like sit down a 13-year-old in 7th grade and explain to her, kind of unlearn the stuff that the school was teaching her when she went to California. I don't like teachers making your kids all political. I don't like I feel like this is child exploitation. I feel like, hey, until our scores go up a little bit, how about we focus on math? How about we focus on reading? How much of the public school system is just indoctrination? And how come more of it is indoctrination that agrees with you? The founding fathers weren't big on protests. You may think, well, yeah, Boston Tea Party or whatnot. No, that was a controversial act. Some founding fathers talked about how that was wrong. And the guys that organized it actually came up with a fund to reimburse the people for the property that was destroyed. I think this is exploiting children. I think it's ugly when the media goes out and treats it like it's normal. Like, hey, this is a good thing. Look, kids are out there making their voice heard. Who cares what kids think? Can't even drive a car. 800-288-9227. Martin in Waxahachie, you're on WBAP.
Hey, James, I agree with you 100%. I think they need to hit those schools that allowed them to walk out of class, hit them in where it counts, and that's in the pocketbook, and take away some of that school funding. Those kids needed to be in school learning how to follow laws, i.e. the ICE doing their job, as opposed to defying law enforcement.
Yeah, you know what? I like how you worded that, because that's what the adults are doing. They're defying the law by interfering with ICE. They're defying the law because they're not going to their job and they're not being productive. They are going to go out and make a political spectacle. And that's a perfect comparison. Good stuff, Martin. What would you do if this was your kid?
I would treat my kid a whole lot different. They need to be in school learning, again, how to follow the laws, learn about government, not out there in the street having vulgar signs and thinking that they're making a difference. They're not even voters. I agree with you where you said these are just children.
Yeah,
they need to be in school.
And I hate that they feel like they're making a difference part, because they're training them to do this as adults. They're training them, like, if you don't like your salary at Starbucks, not to go develop a marketable skill and go get a job elsewhere that's probably more difficult than making a latte, and you will earn more money. No, they teach them to have a hissy fit and walk out and protest and put up a sign and scream in the street corners, and then the media will show up and you'll do a little performative dance on camera and you'll get all kinds of positive news coverage, and you'll shame and berate and bully your employer into agreeing with you. It's a terrible precedent. Should students be allowed to protest? Should they be allowed to walk out? And who's the real villain here? Who are the teachers and administration that allow this? 800-288-9227. It happened in Texas. I'll play a little devil's advocate next on News Talk 820, 993 FM, WBAP. Should students be allowed to protest? There was a walkout to protest ICE here in Texas. I'm James Parker, News Talk 820 93.3 FM WBAP, your home for Markley, Van Camp, and Robbins. Happened down in Bryan. Students were walking out to protest ICE, and some of them said F ICE on their signs. Most of the signs were nice. They're just having a good old time. But I have the same problem about these protests that I have with most protests that are around a school. Number one, you're dealing with the youngest, most inexperienced, uneducated people society has to offer. That doesn't make them bad people. It's just, maybe we should wait until you're about 25, 30 before, you've had a job, paid some taxes, maybe gotten a mortgage, maybe had kids before you decide how to govern. Maybe, just finish your studies. Maybe, when you're a freshman in high school, we shouldn't be paying attention to the person who hasn't even read the Constitution yet. But let's put it like this. This is actually really good training for what's happening now in the adults in our world. Because if you or I just decided on our own, whether you're a straight white Christian male like me or not, if you just went outside and you decided to block a street, what would happen? Eventually, someone would call the cops. You'd get removed. You'd probably be charged with a crime. If you went out and you banged a cowbell or a bullhorn or an air horn outside of a hotel room, whether ICE was sleeping there or not, but just to disrupt the people who were sleeping in that hotel, they would ask you to stop. If you didn't stop, they would call the police. Police would ask you to stop. If you still didn't stop, they would put you in handcuffs and they would take you away, disturbing the peace, whatever the heck. But if you're a lefty mob that's encouraging antipathy for your political opposition, you can get away with anything. You can get away with things that you and I can't get away with. You get special privileges. You get special treatment. You get exemptions to the rules. They will relax law and order and the rule of law, because more important than the rule of law is what? Their political ideology, forcing their political ideology on you. And that's exactly what's happening here. If you're a normal student, if you went to school one day and you decided, hey, I'm just going to walk out in the middle of fourth period, I'm going to go stand on this sidewalk, hold a sign, and scream at people, what would happen? You would probably be punished according to the school rules regarding whatever skipping class is. I know what it was for being tardy. I know what it was for skipping class at Bug Tussle High School. I know because I still owe them like 9 days of Saturday school. I don't think they're going to get it. But yeah, you would get detention. You would get in-school suspension. You would get Saturday school, whatever the punishment in the rule books is. But are all of these kids going to get punished like that? Or are they learning the very true lesson, sad as it may be, that if you're part of a lefty mob that's encouraging antipathy for your political opposition, you can bend the rules. You get special privileges. I think that's quite disappointing, but very telling that they're learning a bad lesson. But that is actually the way the world works right now in 2026. What would you do if that was one of your kids? 800-288-9227, 800-288-9227. And I try and see this from both sides. I try and see this what if, think about it like this. There's a bunch of parents out there who would love to have their kids walk out. They would love to have their kids be taught, hey, if things aren't going your way politically, you make a sign, you go have a hissy fit in the street. That's how you get things done. Now, that's not what you believe. That's not what I believe. It's not what the Constitution tells you to do. But they should be allowed to think wrong things. So what's the real solution to this? You got to identify the real problem with this. The problem is you don't get to choose whether or not you go to the school that allows protests. And the problem for them is they would like to go to the schools that allow protests. They don't get to choose to actively seek those schools out because we're all locked into this prepaid government monopoly on public education. We have to break that. This is another, you don't think it's connected, but if we got rid of public schools and public schooling, this is another problem that would be solved. Because if you're a Team Blue parent and you want your kids to learn how to have a hissy fit and protest and make signs and go block streets, you should be able to choose that. You should be able to choose the high school with the teachers that screw math. We're going to get out the markers, get out the foam core board. We're going to go to Michael's or Hobby Lobby or whatever, and we're going to sign up. We're going to go block a street. We're going to go block the entrance to an airport. This will be great. You should be able to do that. You should have the freedom. I want you to have the freedom to do that. I know you politically disagree with me. I don't want you to stop you from pursuing that. I would just like to be able to choose the school that my kids go to in case the one I'm locked into has teachers like this, has an administration like this. This is a great argument for school choice. You can choose your protest school that has all the vulgar books talking about butt stuff in the library for elementary school kids. And I can go to a school that acts like the Bible exists, the most important book in the history of Western civilization. We can actually admit it exists and not shy away from it just because, ooh, Christians are bad. And I think that's the real lesson here. I know this doesn't settle well, but we have the people who talk about we've got to have these property taxes come down. We've got to maybe we can get rid of property taxes. I think it's unfair that I've paid off my house and I keep having to pay out property taxes. And if I don't keep up with them, I'll lose my house, so I don't really own my home. This solves all of that. You want to get rid of all those property taxes in public schools. Just because every other state is making the same mistake doesn't mean Texas has to follow. The leader does something different, and then everybody else sees that system is better. And they what? They follow the leader. They make adjustments according to what we do. Why not be the first? How many people actually believe that? I know I believe in getting rid of public schools, but am I just like way out on a limb all by myself? Like, and the limbs just real thin and breaking under me? Do I sound like a crazy person when I say that? Because I'll be hanging out with friends and I'll mention, they'll be like, yeah, well, maybe. But I don't know if they're just saying that to be nice. Does anybody else actually want to get rid of public schools? And it's because of stuff like this. It's because of the DEI stuff. It's because of all the race stuff, the 1619 Project, and white people are evil, and Christians are evil, and we can't admit the Bible exists. Because it'll solve all of those problems. And then it'll also get rid of all those property taxes, which I hear a lot of you people griping about. Kill two birds with one stone. Then you don't have to worry about Common Core math. You don't have to worry about critical race theory. You get to choose. Wouldn't that be better? Why do people fight me on this? 800-288-9227. 800-288-9227. Coming up next, we're about to have a real big fight here on voter ID because a lot of people are asking, why aren't we passing the SAVE Act? Why isn't voter ID the law of the land? I'm James Parker. It's News Talk 820, 93.3 FM, WBAP. Should we have voter ID, also known as is voter ID racist? I know it sounds silly. I'm James Parker, News Talk 820, 93.3 FM WBAP. Now, there's been a push for the SAVE Act to be passed. A lot of people are questioning why hasn't it passed already. And the debate online is more fun that's being held than the debate in the media. Because the debate in the media, here, I'll give you an example. Sonny Hostin on The View or from The View, voter IDs racist against blacks and women.
Don't have cars, don't have driver's licenses. So it's sort of a vestige of, I think, post-slavery laws where black people had to prove their right to vote. And oftentimes they couldn't vote because they couldn't pass some crazy test or they didn't have the appropriate ID. It also affects women that are married. Maybe your passport reflects something that's different on your birth certificate or on your driver's license. So really the bottom line is voter suppression. And I agree with him 100%. It's a brilliant notion that less voter ID laws allows more people to vote. And most democracies do it that way. We're the only ones that really don't do it that way.
Right.
Yeah, most democracies do it that way. We're among the only ones that don't do it that way. Really? Most democracies do it that way? Do you know how many countries require voter IDs? And out of all the countries in the world, most of them aren't democracies. They're run by either a dictator or someone who pretends to have fair elections. But the truth is, for most countries, they do have voter ID laws. In fact, voter ID laws are the rule in everywhere in Europe but England. In fact, it's just us, England, Australia, New Zealand, and a couple of other small exceptions. Almost every other country has voter ID. Out of the 47 nations in the most developed continent, Europe, 46 of them have voter ID laws. They require a government-issued photo voter ID to vote. Even within Britain, voter IDs are mandatory in Northern Ireland and in other parts of England for local elections. So it's not even ubiquitous there. So aside from 3 countries and about 14 American states, every other democracy on planet Earth requires a photo voter ID. And Sonny Hostin is just coming out here telling you the exact opposite. Oh, that's what most democracies do here. Let me go to the end part here.
And 100%. It's a brilliant notion that less voter ID laws allows more people to vote. And most democracies do it that way. We're the only ones that really don't do it that way.
Right.
Oh, that's such a lie. We're among the exceptions that do it that way. There's only like 4 countries that do it this way. And if you want to count 14 states here, wow. Like, that's not just wrong. This is wrong as wrong can be. But also, she just says this is a great suppression tool. Is it? What's your evidence for that? Because evidence for that could be had in Alabama. In Alabama, they used to have loose voter ID laws when Democrats were running the place. And then when Republicans finally took over and it became a red state, which wasn't that long ago. When did the state legislature flip in Alabama? Like 2012? It wasn't that long ago. So it was in the last 15 years that they instituted voter ID requirements and they cleaned off all the dead people off their voter rolls. Now that Democrats weren't in charge anymore, they had to go, buck up the election system and get rid of all the fraud. Now, with their new voter ID laws and with their purged voter registration database, did participation in democracy go down or go up? Of course, I wouldn't bring it up if it hurt my argument here. But yeah, it went up, even among black people. When they added voter ID laws in Alabama, black voter turnout and nominal numbers of black voters both increased. So again, Sonny Hostin is not just wrong. She's 180 degrees from the truth. So that's why these arguments that are being had in the media are just worthless. I mean, you got one side saying we need voter ID laws. Here's Trump. We need it.
All we want is voter ID. You go to a grocery store, you have to give ID. You go to a gas station, you give ID. But for voting, they want no voter ID. There's only for one reason, because they cheat. We would pass that in 15 minutes. If you don't get it, you'll never pass that. You'll never talk about mail-in ballots. Mail-in ballots make it automatically corrupt. If you have mail-in ballots, automatically it's correct. Even Jimmy Carter, they had the Carter Commission after he got out of office, and he had a group of very distinguished people, Democrats and Republicans, and they passed, they recommended things take place. It was a long time ago. And they said about mail-in ballots, if there is mail-in ballots, there will definitely be corruption because, they pass through too many hands.
So online, this is what the sort of back and forth between the viral video sets have going on now. Number one, here's a lady that is pointing out Costco requires a photo ID.
Costco now requires you to match your membership photo ID card with your face when you arrive to verify your membership, which means it's officially harder to get into Costco than it is to vote.
Yeah, and you got to be careful here because, you're accusing people of abusing a system. And what I think what we've learned from all these videos and Nick Shirley and Minneapolis daycares and home health care and all this other stuff is, people who are Democrats, they definitely wouldn't game the system. They wouldn't cheat like that. They wouldn't do fraud. Now, here's the argument on the other side when it comes to voter ID. What's the argument? Oh, you must be either evil or stupid.
I'm convinced that if you're a Trump supporter, one of two things have to be true. You're either so terrified to lose your status and power and privilege, or you're low IQ.
Or we could have noticed this weird pattern where the only states that went blue in the last presidential election are the small handful of states that don't have voter ID requirements. Isn't that an interesting pattern? Maybe we're interested in that. Maybe we're not just dumb or evil. Maybe we want a smaller government and fair elections. Call me crazy. This is Steve in Farmersville. You're on WBAP. Hey, Steve.
Hello, sir. How you doing? As a conservative, I'm going to have to disagree with voter ID. Because voting is a right, okay? Everything that you listed that you have to have an ID for, privilege. Okay, so far, everything I've heard is a privilege. Walking into Costco, you don't have a right to walk in there. That's a privilege. All right? Voting is a right. Now, we need to figure something out. We need to cut where you got 1 week of early voting and then the day of election, and that's it. I would be game for that. But I'm against voter ID. Take my call.
All right, fair enough. I guess. So all but four democracies on the planet are not allowing their citizens the right to vote. See, I think because it's a right to vote, there needs to be safeguards so people can't game the system. Because my vote means absolutely nothing if some fake guy can come in after me and cast 4 ballots because he got a bunch of harvested mail-in ballots from his apartment's mailroom, or from however he got them, or from a corrupt mailman, or because he went to the local senior center and asked them all, hey, have you checked your mail and got your mail-in ballot? Let me help you fill that out. Because there's roving groups of, air quote, voting rights groups that help old people, or air quote, help old people fill out their mail-in ballots. And it's just a ballot harvesting scheme. There was a great O'Keefe undercover sting video of these activists doing that, and they were talking to old people into changing their vote. You sure you didn't mean to hit this box? Oh, don't forget this one right here. And they're basically taking these old demented people and voting for them and then gathering their ballots together and taking them off in a big bundle of wins, which I think is illegal. 800-288-9227. We're talking about voter ID. The SAVE Act is on the table. Will it pass? I'm James Parker, News Talk 820, 93.3 FM, WBAP. So photo ID to vote. Is that really oppressive or is that common sense? I'm James Parker, News Talk 820 93.3 FM WBAP. So it's being discussed right now. And look, the last caller there had a right-wing criticism for it, which I found was interesting. He doesn't like photo IDs to vote because voting is a right, and he should only have to show a photo ID for privileges, for going into Costco, for getting a beer, for driving on the street. That was his explanation for it. Now, I'm not saying I agree with that, but I do like to at least try and come up with some criticism. And I mean, from the left-wing perspective, we know what they're going to say. It's racist, it's sexist, it's bigoted, it's homophobic. We got it. It's the whole Sonny Hostin parade of deplorables thing.
Don't have cars, don't have driver's licenses. So it's sort of a vestige of, I think, post-slavery laws where black people.
I'm not listening to that whole thing again. So you know what she's going to say anyway. It's racist. We got it. We got it. Which is kind of a racist comment. Like, you can't expect blacks to have an ID. That's a level of responsibility that they can't be held to the same standard as their white counterparts. It's like, wow, that's a pretty racist statement you're making there. But we'll just work with that. On the other side, Trump is saying the only reason you would oppose voter ID is because you want to cheat. Now, I see in the SAVE Act when they do the whip list, when the whip goes through, it's his job to round up the votes. And they don't even bring stuff to the floor unless they know how the votes are going to go. And so I think some of the Freedom Caucus guys are against the SAVE Act. And I, without looking into it too much, I'm going to guess that they don't like the idea of the federal government controlling the elections that are happening in independent states. You want the states to control them and not for the federal government to be sovereign. You'd rather have 50 different election systems than one federal one. And that's the way it's written in the Constitution. They are specific in the Constitution that all the election rules should be under the control of the local state legislature, not the federal government. So that's really the only decent argument I can find against it that I actually agree with. The rest of it is you just want to cheat, don't you? This is Brent, Lake Weatherford. You're on WBAP.
In Parker County, you can get there and the voting judge I usually see is John. I said, John, how you doing? He said, I'm doing good, Brent. I said, well, John, here's my voter ID. He goes, it's good to see you, Brent. He said, now can I see your driver's license? And I've known the guy for, 40 years. So over here, that's just the way it is, and everybody respects it. And I don't know if it's because where I live, a very conservative county or what, but I just like the protection for our nation and for the voting privilege. To me, it's a privilege too, to not just a right. It's absolutely a privilege to be in the United States, to be in Texas, and to be able to conduct, meaningful and legal elections.
Yeah, and I love the arguments against this because they have such a hard time. They're like, well, this violates people's rights. It's like, really? Every democracy except for 4 of them require a photo ID. They're all getting it wrong. Because when they all have universal health care, you're like, how come we're the only country that doesn't do what all these other awesome countries are doing? Well, do that for voter ID. How come we're the only country that isn't doing what all these other awesome countries are doing? Or do it for abortion. Almost all developed countries have abortion restrictions. And, you don't want to copy them then just for what, universal health care or whatever weird social issue you people have going on. But for the people who don't want voter ID, this is a great illustration of the difference between the true believers on Team Blue and the mindless foot soldiers. They call them useful idiots because the mindless foot soldiers are thinking, well, this is just racism. This is oppression. But the true believers, the people that are in the system, the inner party, they know this is just a cheat. They know that's what this is for. And you would think, thank you very much for calling. You would think that if the roles were reversed and in 2020, there were 5 swing states that stopped voting. And then when they turned the lights back on a few hours later, all of a sudden they had found tons of votes for Republicans. And all of a sudden Republicans flipped 5 states, that there would be some, at least interest, a little curiosity into voter integrity. You would think. Lee in Dallas, you're on WBAP.
Yes, back to that caller who said it was a right. It is a right. It's an American citizen right. And you have to be an American citizen. And if you want to vote, a voter ID shouldn't be a problem. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, no, and that's cool. Like, I didn't want to be rude to the guy because he's making a point that most people don't make, but I don't see how that's a deal breaker. You know, in order entering this country, like coming across the international border into this country, is a right that we all have as Americans. But you still have to show a photo ID to do it. My passport has a photo in it. I have to show that at the border when I'm going through customs or whatever. So I don't see how that betrays your rights to show a photo ID to do something. This is Travis and Kearns. You're on WBAP.
Yes, sir. I'm all for the voter ID. My very first time to ever vote back in 1990. You just showed your voter registration card, signed a little document, and be done. Well, when your father and you and your mom all have the same last name, I was denied because my father inadvertently signed on the wrong line. He signed on my line and not his line, and it took an hour and a half to get the situation resolved so I could go vote. Thanks. Have a great day.
Dang. All right. Well, good. At least there's some integrity where you vote. Somewhat. Kevin in Dallas, you're on WBAP. Your thoughts on voter ID?
I'm all for it. I'd like to call the guy's bluff on I agree it's a right to vote. He says you shouldn't have an ID. That's a right to own a firearm. Should I have to prove with an ID who I am to buy a firearm? I bet he's going to say, yes, you need an ID to buy a firearm.
That's an even better argument than I had. You beat me, Kevin. Kevin gets 7 points. Garrett, you got the scoreboard over there? Garrett.
Yep. I would call his bluff.
All right. Well, Kevin in Dallas, 7 points, Garrett. Focus, Garrett. I think he heard that. Bill and Rowlett's next. Hey, Bill, you're on WBAP. Your thoughts on voter ID?
Yeah. Well, I just got one question that's been puzzling me. Biden got 81 million votes in the 2020 election.
Sure did, didn't he?
Kamala Harris got 75 million. And I just want to know where those 6 million votes went. I have not heard one person make the answer or, pose that question. Where did 6 million votes go?
Bill, we got to get a search party. There's people missing. We're missing 6 million American voters. This is a tragedy. We've got to find them.
So,
yeah, I think we'll find them right after we find the O.J. Simpson's killer or Nicole Brown Simpson's killer. Remember, he was looking for her.
No, I think we'll find them in graveyards all over the United States.
Well, absolutely. Look, you don't even have to be able to go to court and say, here's Exhibit A or here's Exhibit B or here's the line items on why we know the 2020 election was stolen. We don't have to know any details to know that, wow, that's an amazing coincidence for voting to stop in 5 states on election night. Because, Bill, in your lifetime, and actually I looked it up, through all of American history, they never stopped counting votes on election day, even before they had electricity. They're sitting in a rainstorm with candles and lanterns counting votes until it was done. So that was the only time that happened. Also, there was a big jump up in votes. So then it looks suspicious there. But we've had another election since then, and now we know it's fake. Because what happened? We didn't have to stop counting votes in the middle of the night in 2024. Oh, that's weird. And all those states flipped back to Donald Trump when we didn't do the stopping of the votes, and all the 6 million extra voters just disappeared into the ether. With the odds of that just being a coin flip, not possible. I'm James Parker, News Talk 820, 93.3 FM, WBAP. Are we going to get voter ID to vote? And if not, are we ever going to have fair elections? I'm James Parker, News Talk 820, 93.3 FM, WBAP. And I love this because this encapsulates so many of the debates in the public discourse in America these days, because one side says it's the worst thing in the world. The other side says it's the best thing in the world. One side says it's a threat to democracy to institute it. The other side says it's a threat to democracy to not have it. And I find the challenge here is to find somebody who can explain to me, and while seeing both sides on the voter ID argument, how can you be against this again? How can you be against making sure people aren't just the bare minimum of safeguards to prevent elections from being stolen or tampered with or somehow exploited? Just really not a voter ID? Because the arguments are obvious. You have to show a voter ID to get alcohol, to drive a car, to do 28 other things that you do every day. Is that racist? Is that sexist? Is that a violation of your rights? Absolutely not. So why is this? Well, some people say they just want to cheat. David in Bedford, you're on WBAP.
Oh, hi. You know, what you just said is, I'm just going to back up what you just said, but you know, I coach a lot of sports for years and years. My kids, grandkids, other kids, it's been years. And in every situation, no matter who you are, what race you are, what color you are, you have to show ID for your kids to play ball. And in every community in the world, in America, they have to show ID for the kids to play sports. That's just the way it is, for coverage, for insurance, anything. And so how are these people having a hard time showing ID to vote when you have to show ID for your kids?
So why do you think they do it?
Of course, it's for cheating. Absolutely. It's just that door, that window of cheating. And I'm for fingerprint. I'm for a fingerprint ID. A photo's fine, but I think a thumbprint, fingerprint, whenever it shows up, one, if you committed any crime, it's going to show up in a database somewhere. But two, if you vote with a fingerprint or a thumbprint, it'll be there forever. And if you vote another time when you shouldn't, it's in your ID is done with a fingerprint.
Well, you know, a lot of countries do that. Did you know that, or did you come?
I did know that. Yes. And some of the recent countries we had over the decades, last decade or whatever, the people had a chance to vote for the first time ever, and they voted with ink, with a thumbprint.
Yeah, and so I don't think it really dawned on me until we went in and we knocked out Saddam Hussein, and then it was in 2004, 2005. They finally had elections in Iraq, and you saw the people who were out in the street holding up their finger that was blue.
They were proud of it.
Yeah. And I was like, why do they all have blue fingers? And it was like, well, they have a fingerprint-based voting system. You know, they didn't have the strongest database infrastructure in Iraq before we went in and blew everything up. So, you know, the records were kind of scant and not really reliable, and so an ID wasn't really enough for their election security. So they went ahead and threw on top of that a fingerprint. And now you can run it through a database, and if there's any duplicate fingerprints, you can throw out the duplicate votes, or maybe go back and charge that dude with a crime or whatnot. But yeah, there's a lot of ways we can do this. Maybe we don't do photo ID. Maybe we do the fingerprint system. But we can't do nothing, because we see what happens when we do nothing. They turn off the lights, a bunch of ballots show up. They're like, oh, well, we waived the signature verification. And no, we're not looking at postmarks either. Yeah, it's just an emergency measure. Our Secretary of State on the state level decided we're not going to look at that this year. And elections get stolen. If you're against voter ID, well, tell me what measure of election integrity you would support. Because if the answer is none, then you really do just want to steal elections. Don't you? This is other David. David in Arlington, you're on WBAP.
Yes, sir. The gentleman that told about the right to vote was missing a sterling piece of information, and that was that I believe that the voting is designated for every lawful and legal citizen to vote. And the voter ID is to establish the citizenship and the identity and to separate the sheep from the goats.
Well, I thought you were going to bring up the fact that technically the right to vote isn't in the Constitution. You know, nowhere in the Constitution do they enumerate all citizens will have the right to vote, or most citizens, or white male citizens, or property owners will have the right to vote. The right to vote was left up to the states on who gets to vote. What if you're going to be a citizen, if you're going to be a male, if you're going to be a head of household, if you're going to be whatever the rules were, that was all given over to the state. So technically the right to vote isn't in the Constitution. I thought that's where you're going to go with that, David, when you started.
Well, thank you very much. No, that's true. But most of the states do establish that you have to be, in depending upon the level of the election, a citizen, and you have to be lawful.
Yeah, and then you get into some ugly situations where, David, there's a lot of municipalities on the municipal level where they actually have it written into law where they allow non-citizens and even illegal immigrants to vote.
Yes, and look what those people are in as far as the characteristic of their organization.
Yeah, and I don't think it's an accident when you open up voting to non-Americans, whether they're here legal or illegally, they overwhelmingly vote for Team Blue. And I don't think that's a bragging point. I don't think that's a feature. I think that's a flaw. Coming up next on the James Show, I have an update from academia. University of Arkansas had a walkout at their law school yesterday, but I'm going to go into the archives and it's going to get pretty brutal. We're going to beat up academia next on News Talk 820, 93.3 FM WBAP. So just how bad is academia? It's always worse than you thought. It's the James Show, News Talk 820, 93.3 FM, WBAP. At the University of Arkansas, their law school was looking for a new dean. And the person that was announced to be hired, some people, internet ninjas, did some digging. And apparently, just regular old goobers like you and me with access to an internet browser can do better research than an entire university who is tasked with the job of finding the best person to be the dean of the law school. How is it that some guy, probably named Skater, who's living in Bunny Chip, Arkansas, can do a couple of Google searches and show the world that the lady that they're about to hire to run the law school believes in some pretty crazy things? And it's the normal stuff for the Team Blue mutants. You know, men can have babies, white people are evil, this country sucks. And so they took some screenshots, they passed it around social media, and in Arkansas circles, this was kind of a big deal. So there were some, local politicians in our goofy little state to the northeast that made a fuss. Some low-level media people made a fuss on the state level. And the big one, from what I hear, was there was a bunch of donors, a bunch of alumni to the University of Arkansas, and Razorback Nation was not so happy with where their money was going. And so they rescinded the offer for her to be the next dean of their law school. I think she still works there. She's just, going to get a $300,000 check and won't have the title to go with it. So yesterday, January 20th, a bunch of kids in the law school walked out. Students, they're adults, but
Alive and well.
Hey, yeah, having a good time walking out of law school because they won't hire a dean that admits the most basic biology lesson. Men cannot have babies. I can't believe that's such a controversial statement to make in 2026. Now, if you disagree with me, that's fine. I don't think you're a bad person. You probably mean well. You're not evil. You're not a Nazi. You just listen to, the wrong people on TV. But you shouldn't be in charge of anything academic, because I think this is the perfect litmus test. Like you saw in, did you actually read 1984? I know a lot of people bring up George Orwell's 1984, but when Winston Smith is being tortured by the party, the socialist, they ask him, 2 + 2 = 4? And he said, yeah, 2 + 2 = 4. And they said, no, it equals 5. And he's like, but no, the party says it's 5. Well, it's still 4. And so they tortured him. And after they kept torturing him, putting a rat on his face and all this other stuff and pulling all his teeth out. I mean, it's really awful stuff. Finally, they got him to admit. They said, what's 2 + 2? And he said, 5. It's 5. And they're like, you know what? I don't believe you. I think you're just saying that. So I don't think you really believe 2 + 2 = 5. I think you're just saying that so we don't torture you some more. So they tortured him some more. And so now the litmus test is, can you force people to not only say these things while they're rolling their eyes and sure, just to humor them, but actually act like it's the truth? And the answer here is yes. Now, I want to go back in the Audiotron 3000. There was a story that was in the comment section on the Arkansas situation here with the videos of the kids walking out of class. And someone brought this up from just a couple states over there. At Kansas University, this is a report from KCTV about 7 years, or no, this was only like 4 years ago. I think, what was this, 2019? So 6 years ago? No, that is 7 years ago. This is 2026. They had a class called Angry White Males.
Angry White Male Studies is addressing topics right out of our own headlines. New at 6, our Kelly Taylor explains what students think about the topic.
The class charts the rise of the angry white male in America and Britain since the 1905s, according to the course description. Students will explore the deeper sources of white man anger and evaluate recent manifestations of it. We wanted to know why the college is offering.
All right, stop it. They actually have a whole class on how white men are evil. That's great. That's fantastic. And that was 7 years ago. I went and checked this morning, right before the shift started. That class is still being offered. It's offered in the spring if you want to take it. If you want to learn more about how white people are evil, I mean, you can turn on CNN or MSNBC or sign up for this class. That class is still there. You understand they've been teaching this to kids? So academia is just off the rocker. The fact that we're not all shouting down the Department of Education and demanding the end of all public funding and government intervention into the academic system, I don't understand why we all don't agree on that right now. We should all just be civil libertarians at this point when it comes to public schooling. Because these people, these professors, that guy gets paid $380,000 a year to teach young, impressionable kids that you're evil, and he takes your money to do it. And it is a guy, I looked it up. It's a white guy that teaches that class. Isn't that some brutal irony? Yay, Kansas. All right, coming up this afternoon, the James Show is going to be live from the Fort Worth Stock Show and Rodeo. I'm going to be in the Amon Carter Exhibit Hall along with all the other tractors and clothes and fun stuff. And we're on row 300, pretty easy to find. Come on out. I'll be there live from 2 to 5. Come say hi and judge me based on my appearance. It'll be a good time. I'm James Parker. Stick around. Markley, Van Camp, and Robbins is coming up next. It's News Talk 820, 93.3 FM, WBAP.